Some breaking news, Falcons fans. According to our guy Rap Sheet, the Falcons are expected to hire former Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator Tommy Rees. This is not crazy news considering he was the odds-on favorite to land the role, but according to Rap Sheet, it is pretty much as good as done. Welcome into Falcons Today by Chat Sports. My name is Moose. I just want to go on the record and say that this is not my first choice here, and I say that as a Notre Dame guy. And Tommy Rees was the quarterback at Notre Dame. He was the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. He was an offensive coordinator at Alabama, and most recently with the Cleveland Browns. And I'm just going to say it out loud. I do not think that this is the right move. I'll explain why coming up here in just a little bit. But before we do that, guys, we are 100 subs away from the first major milestone here on the channel. So, if you love daily content, sometimes twice a day, like today and yesterday and the day before that, do me a massive favor, smash that subscribe button. Let's get over 50K on this video. I know it's a hefty ask. I think we can do it. Let's push to 50,000 subs here on today's episode as we break down Tommy Rees. So, what do you need to know about Mr. Rees, the new offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, or so we think he's going to be the next offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons? Obviously, the deal hasn't been finalized yet, but if Rap Sheet is putting this out there, it's pretty much as good as done. Former quarterback for the University of Notre Dame named the Browns offensive coordinator in January of 2025, so just about a year ago. And this last year, under Tommy Rees, 30th ranked offense in the league. That is not good. Now, granted, I will say this. The Cleveland Browns had no help. Nothing. They had the worst or second worst offensive line in the entirety of the NFL. They had a lack of weapons outside of Quinshon Judkins. They had a rotating door of quarterbacks to choose from. This is not entirely on Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees. Part of this is on Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam for having such a shitty roster designation and roster construction. But like I told you, I'm still very much on the fence about hiring Tommy Rees. I know what his play call design is. I've watched him play every snap at Notre Dame. I watched him call plays at Notre Dame. He is a run-first guy, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but he lacks that creativity that I'm looking for in an offensive coordinator. And remember, the Browns' offensive line was poop. Butt cheeks. It was awful. 31st ranked offensive line in the league this past season. 31st. That is beyond terrible. So can we really sit here and act like Tommy Rees completely failed the players around him? No, because they sucked. I mean, you try making, a piece of shit look like, polish. I mean, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Here's what I also know. He's a player-adaptable coordinator that emphasizes pre-snap motion and quarterback pocket mobility. When he was coaching at Notre Dame, they always had incredibly mobile quarterbacks. They always emphasized the run game, and they always had strong offensive lines. That's why he was able to get a promotion and go to the University of Alabama to be their offensive coordinator for quite some time. This means, to me at least, that Bijan Robinson is going to be the primary focus of this offense, and as he should be. He's the best player in the NFL at his position. There's no doubt in my mind that under Tommy Rees, he will have a wonderful season like he did last season. But Bijan was great with Zach Robinson. And what does that tell you? But not much. So Bijan's going to Bijan. We know that. The good news is that you will not see Bijan be taken off the field on third and short situations with the game on the line. I've watched Tommy Rees prioritize the best playmakers at the University of Notre Dame and with the Cleveland Browns with Quinshon Judkins most recently. Some other 2026 principles, though, that he brings to the table alongside Kevin Stefanski, who, by the way, will call plays. Kevin Stefanski is going to call plays. I just kind of worry, and we'll touch on this at the back half. The offense will be built around Bijan and an offensive line structure. Penix will be asked to manage the game, not control it like Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. And you will get a lot more controlled third down situations, notably no third down and nines or third down and longs. So Tommy Rees will do his very best to make the game shorter, to shorten the field, and to make those third downs more manageable. A spot in the Falcons offense this last season that was notoriously horrible under Zach Robinson. But as I said before, We can go back and forth about the good things that Tommy Rees brings in and Kevin Stefanski brings in. I don't think either guy is creative enough. I don't think Kevin Stefanski is creative enough to call the plays, and I don't think that Tommy Rees will. So while they might bring a very solid game plan, and they do bring a lot of the core principles that someone like Clint Kubiak would run, I don't think they have the creativity of a Mike McDaniel. I don't think they have a creativity of a Clint Kubiak or the top play callers in the NFL, if that makes sense. So only time will tell if this system fits what Penix is going to be molded into, or Kirk Cousins, and let's just see if they can carry it and put the emphasis of the game on the shoulders and the legs of Bijan Robinson. If you had to grade the higher, let me know, A, B, C, D, or F. C. Like I said, it was expected. I just think it's a very much a lateral move on Kevin Stefanski's part. I would have gone out and done all of my homework on some play callers that I believe deserved a shot to show their creativity, showcase what kind of offense that they can run. We know what Tommy Rees is going to run, a wide zone scheme run, and he's going to try to emphasize getting outside of the tackles as frequently as possible. Now, coming up, and all that's left on this Falcons coaching staff, besides the positional coaches like the wide receivers coach and stuff, is the special teams coordinator. We're going to touch on that here on the back half of this episode. Before that, though, got to tell you about my friends over at Prize Picks. The big game is right around the corner, my friends. I'm very, very excited to see who gets into that big game. But if you want to end the football season on the right note, you got to do me a favor and download the Prize Picks app today. They've got all of the best deals, including new features like early payouts, meaning if your lineup gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash in those winnings before your lineup even finishes. And speaking of lineups, it's very easy to play. You pick your player. The more or less on their stat projections, you watch your money multiply. Find your find your community with the new social tabs feature where you can create lineups from other players in a singular click. So do me a favor, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It is good to be right. Before mentioning the names for special teams coordinator, and if you've watched every episode, you know who we're going to bring up, I think it's important to mention where Atlanta ranked in special teams this season. And if you take a look down at the very bottom of this very small chart, I notably can see how small it is. The Atlanta Falcons were dead last in special teams power rankings. The only team above them was the New Orleans Saints, or all the teams were above them, but the Saints came in 31st is my point. And then the Cleveland Browns were 30th. So that's not good. If the only teams that were worse than you on special teams were the Saints and the Falcons, your unit sucked. And the Falcons special teams was by far the worst special teams unit in the entire NFL, and it wasn't that close. And the guy who ran special teams for the Browns was Bubba Ventrone. I do not want Bubba Ventrone. I don't think he's good enough to get the job. So if you're already going to hire Tommy Rees, okay, I can live with it if Kevin Stefanski is calling plays. What I can't live with is going with the exact same coaches that you did in Cleveland and expecting a different result. Isn't the old saying, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result? So don't do the same thing. Go out and get Brian Schneider. Go out and get Brian Schneider from the Commies. Notably, he's wearing San Francisco stuff here. I could not find a photo of him in Washington Commanders garb, by the way, which is kind of odd. I scoured the internet, and I could not find anything that was actually clear enough to showcase. There were some grainy photos from practice, but it didn't really do much. But Brian Schneider from the Commies is a coach that is very tenured in the NFL. And ATL Sports Zone did their homework. Shout out to them, and I'm going to read off their quote that they wrote on their website, that Brian Schneider represented the steady hand hire, currently the assistant special teams coordinator for the Washington Commanders. Schneider previously served as Seattle's full-time special teams coordinator for an entire decade, from 2010 to 2020. That type of tenure is almost unheard of in today's NFL, and it speaks to the volumes of his reliability, his discipline, and his results. Schneider cut his teeth in an era where special teams wasn't just supplementary, but it was a true weapon. He understands momentum swings, coverage angles, blocking discipline, and the psychological edge that special teams can provide. And in case you were wondering about that chart that we saw earlier, Washington carried the 5th best special teams in the NFL this past season. Now, remember, he's not the special teams coordinator. He's the assistant special teams coordinator. That's why he would look to jump back into what that role would be. But there has been no reports about Kevin Stefanski going out and potentially getting or bringing in Brian Schneider. I wish there was, because the only name linked right now to KS is Bubba Ventrone. Here's my message to you, Kevin Stefanski. I have championed you in the last couple of videos. I do believe that you are an upgrade to Raheem Morris. Do not mess this hire up. Do not think that what you did in Cleveland was just a one-off because of how bad the ownership and GM was. Go out, do the homework, interview the right candidates to bring in on this staff. Do not make the same mistake that you made in Cleveland. Because as much as I believe not all of it was your fault in Cleveland, you did play a hand in what went wrong in Cleveland. You were the head coach. You've only won 8 games in 2 seasons. You've got to rewrite the narrative. And part of that means making the tough decisions and going out and hiring guys that weren't on your staff previously. Before we take on off out of here, we're very close to 50K. Very, very close. So do me a favor. Hit that little sub button. It's free. It'll never cost you anything, by the way. ESPN Plus for Falcons coverage could cost you upwards of $160 a year. Falcons Today never charges you a singular dime. So do yourself a favor, sub for the very best Atlanta Falcons content on YouTube. That's all I got for you today. I'm going to go and do more homework on some more coordinator stuff. Be back tomorrow with more news and rumors surrounding your Dirty Birds. I'm actually thinking about making a little mock draft video tomorrow. Maybe not an entire mock draft, but some draft targets is a better way of putting that. So keep your eyes peeled for that tomorrow morning. That's all I got for you, Falcons fans. As always, rise up and be cool.